Hello, everyone. Father Norm here again. This coming weekend, actually leading up to Monday, we remember Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Each year, it's a federal holiday to remind us, hopefully more than once a year, of what he spoke of what we still need to hear and be influenced by. First of all, I'm probably repeating this and I will do it every year. I have a pet peeve. I don't have many of them, but I have a pet peeve that whenever King is spoken about in articles in the newspaper, they usually say Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What they leave out, you can watch it. I even encourage the kids to look at the newspaper this weekend and Monday. They leave out the word Reverend. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That's absolutely fundamental because that's the foundation of who he was and the influence he had and what he wanted to convey to us as the United States of America and really to the world. Again, the notion of his faith, his Christian faith, was first of all, he experienced what he did as a calling from God. Not in other words like as simply a moral tactic, important, but for him a calling from God to proclaim, which he did from his pulpit initially because he was a pastor in a pulpit, but then his pulpit became the community, the world. And in saying that, what he wanted to proclaim from God is the human dignity of every person. In fact, the image he used in his own Christian understanding was every human being is made in the image and likeness of God. And that's what founded him, that calling to proclaim that calling to speak wherever that was being disregarded, and that calling that gave him the passion to keep going, even though a lot of people put him down and said, "Why are you doing this?" And when we look at that, we can see not only in that sense of the calling, which is the biblical notion, but also the reality that God called us into community and into worldwide community. Jesus spoke of God's universal love. And so that notion of solidarity. Another thing for King, our life isn't just what we do for ourselves, how successful we are, what difference we might make, led by our own ego of what people think of us. But the calling is to foster that solidarity, that sense of community, that reality that we're all called to look out for one another. Our life is not simply our own. And so, again, do we need to hear that today? Maybe now more than ever, with so much division and hostility. Because this was also another notion that King had, Reverend King, I probably should say. But anyway, that notion of nonviolence. And for him, nonviolence wasn't simply a tactic. It wasn't simply a way to get attention. Nonviolence for him was following the way of Jesus that said we are called to reach out to others. Jesus talks in the Beatitudes and in the Sermon on the Mount. We are called to be peacemakers. We are called to be nonviolent in what we do. We are called to be influenced most of all by love. And what King meant by love, agape, which is the Greek term in the New Testament that's used for what Jesus says. Love in that is meant to be a moral force. It's not only, and maybe even not sometimes, an emotional feeling. It certainly can be, but love that God calls us to is to self-give and seek the good of the other. Self-giving, seeking the good of the other, and emphasizing that. And he did that with all the people who followed him, and again called people. And we need to hear today where there's differences that people become hostile, people put each other down, people use language that's contemptuous of people. And for King, again, it's that call to be loving in attitude, to be loving in action, because that was another point, that out of that love, which is more than a feeling, it's acting in the community, it's acting in family life, it's acting in the churches to genuinely seek the good of the other. And in his day, he saw the whole issue of race, the whole issue of discrimination, the whole issue of whole peoples being put down and violated. And even there, he recognized it first began with what he saw in the black community as a pastor. But also, as he went on, he spoke about that injustice and violence everywhere. He was critical often in the latter part of his life of the Vietnam War, especially how Americans looked at another people, and sometimes the violent attitude and the prejudice. And so we see that. We also know that he came out of the prophetic call in the scriptures. In the Old Testament, the New Testament, the biblical prophets spoke about a call to justice, and that God was on the side of justice. And so we see the great passion that he had, and we need to look at it today. Each of us individually and as a nation, we need to look, where do we still have prejudice? Where do we still have violent attitudes? Where do we still have contempt for certain people, for who they are, what they are, how we view them? And where do all of us, whatever our color, whatever our background, whatever our religious tradition, where do all of us have to individually take a look at what can I do in my own sphere of influence to bring a little more justice, goodness, and agape, self-giving love to the people around me. So, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, big influence on me in my call, even in my faith. And so, all of us should take a time and not just say, oh yeah, King cared about people. There's so much more than that, and we need to pray about it, reflect on it, and do our part to make a difference. God bless you.